morning, this is Cole at Disability Rights South Dakota. Today, on January 29th, 2024, I'm going to be covering some of the bills that are before the South Dakota legislature this year. Many of the bills that we're talking about do relate to issues interesting to people with disabilities in South Dakota. We'll be covering a number of bills today. In subsequent videos, we may not be covering these same bills. A few of these I just wanted to touch on with you so that you were made aware of them. And if you had any questions about them, you can contact Disability Rights South Dakota, and we'd love to talk to you about them a little bit more. If it's something that's interesting to you, you can contact your legislator and discuss your concerns or questions with them, or you can go to the Capitol here in Pierre and go to the committee's hearings or testify on these bills yourself. I think it's important also to note that Disability Rights South Dakota in this video is not supporting or opposing any of the bills that we'll be discussing. We're simply trying to tell you about the different bills that are before this legislative session this year so that you have an idea of what's going on in the South Dakota legislature and that you can follow up on any questions or concerns that you might have about this legislation. So let's get right into the bills and talk about what's before your South Dakota legislature this 2024 legislative cycle. So as you can see here, we have a number of House bills, a Senate joint resolution, and several Senate bills that we'll be going over here today. House Bill 1008, modify the eligibility for admission to the state veterans home and repeal the residency requirement. This states that a veteran domiciled in this state within the past 5 years shall receive admission preference contingent upon the veterans meeting all admission criteria. A veteran who is a member of a federally recognized Indian tribe located wholly or partially within the state shall receive admission preference contingent upon the veteran meeting all admission criteria as well. This bill was heard before the House Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. It was passed and sent over to the Senate on January 24th, 2024. It remains to be picked up by a Senate committee there. Next, we have House Bill 1012. This is a first in a series of House bills, 1012, 1013, 1015, and 1017, which its goal is to increase the amount of capacity or professionals in a particular area of care in the state to allow caregivers from other states who are licensed to come in and practice here in the state of South Dakota. House Bill 1012 means to adopt the Interstate Counseling Licensure Compact and revise educational requirements to comply with the compact. The purpose of this compact is to facilitate interstate practice of licensed professional counselors with the goal of improving public access to professional counseling services. The practice of professional counseling occurs in the state where the client is located at the time of the counseling services. The compact preserves the regulatory authority of the states to protect the public health and safety through the current system of health state licensure. That House Bill 1012 applies to counseling licensure. 113 is effectively the same statute, the same goal in mind, but it applies to registered nurses in the state. Same thing with 15 for social workers in the state. And finally, 17, psychology professionals. Again, the hope is to bring in professionals from other states, still maintaining the level of professionalism and licensure requirements in the state, but just making sure that people in South Dakota have access to these professionals. 112 is being heard this morning, January 29th, before the Senate Health and Human Services Committee from 7:45 to 9:45. That's in room 412. So you can listen in on that or attend that if you'd like. House Bill 1029, modify and repeal provisions related to the licensure of hearing aid dispensers and audiologists. This act modifies the makeup of the board that licenses hearing aid dispensers and audiologists amend structures for licensure. Basically, it updates the process to bring into line the more modern licensure of those professional practices. This has made it through the House and has been sent over to the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. It's not yet been scheduled for hearing in that committee. House Bill 1082, change the eligibility requirements and exempt the value of property tax relief program for disabled veterans and supporting spouses. This increases the exemption amount of the value of a dwelling from $150,000 to $200,000 and adds an index factor to the statute so that the exemption amount automatically changes with inflation. This has been heard and passed through the House. It has not yet been sent over to the Senate for hearing or committee work. 1085, specify the venue of appeal to a circuit court for persons committed to a mental health facility. This basically adds a provision to appeal the commitment to a circuit court of the county in which the mental health facility is located if the appellant is committed to that facility. No work has been done on this bill as of yet. 1093, make an appropriation to provide a grant for the construction of a facility to provide certain health facilities and services. House Bill 1093 is appropriation from the general fund for the sum of $8 million to the Department of Social Services for purposes of providing a grant to assist in the construction of this facility to provide all of the following: a specialty rehabilitation pediatric hospital, a specialty school for children under 21, an intermediate health care facility for children under 21, and an outpatient rehabilitation pediatric services. So $8 million to build basically a hospital for specific purposes. House Bill 1112, permit a hunter with a disabled hunter permit to use a motorized wheelchair for hunting on school or public lands. This allows a licensed hunter who is paraplegic or is otherwise physically unable to walk with or without crutches, braces, or other mechanical support, who is otherwise considered to be limited or impaired in the hunter's abilities to walk, and who has been issued a disabled hunter permit by the Department of Game, Fish, and Parks, may use a self-propelled wheelchair for purposes of hunting, fishing, or trapping to enter into or cross any land under the control of the Commissioner of a school or public lands on which a public hunting, fishing, or trapping is authorized. This bill was proposed in the South Dakota legislature in 2022, but was withdrawn. So this is no longer a live bill. 1138 establishes a sales tax exemption for certain disabled veterans, an exemption from retail sales and service tax liability from the sales of tangible personal property, any product transferred electronically, and services to a veteran who is rated as permanently and totally disabled from a service-connected disability. The amount of gross receipts exempt under this chapter in any year for any veteran may not exceed $25,000. This bill has been first read into the House and was referred to the House Committee on Taxation and has not been scheduled for hearing there as of yet. 1142, improve education and provide for the workforce in South Dakota. This bill has no language as of yet. It's just a placeholder bill. They call it a hog house or vehicle bill. So there's some work that the sponsor, Representative Mortensen, would like to do around this topic, but has not yet proposed any language supporting this work. So keep an eye on this one. House Bill 1144, provide for the study of community, hope, opportunity, independence, careers, empowerment, success waiver, otherwise known as choices waiver, and provide an appropriation therefore. Uh, in this bill, they're seeking an appropriation from the general fund of a sum of $450,000 to the Department of Legislative Audit for the purposes of hiring a contractor to study the state and federal laws, regulations, and services relating to the operation and administration of the Choices Waiver Program within the Department of Human Services. Basically, a study of the Choices Waiver to see how it's working, how it can be made better, that sort of thing. House Bill 1165, institute procedures for addressing the bullying of a student. This bill has been read into the House Education Committee. They have not yet scheduled it for any sort of hearing or work to be done there, but keep an eye on that one as well for any type of activity related to that topic. Senate Bill 18, allow the Secretary of State to share information from the statewide voter registration file. And this bill states that the Secretary of State may share information from the statewide voter registration file with any other state, territory, or local political subdivision of any other state or territory to identify any duplicate registrations. Before sharing the information from statewide voter registration file with any other jurisdiction pursuant to this section, the Secretary of State must secure an agreement in writing from the chief election official of the jurisdiction with which the information is to be shared, that any personally identifiable information contained within the list may not be shared with or sold to any person who is not an election official for the jurisdiction in which the information is shared. So that's really important. There's been significant work done on this bill already. It's gone through the Senate, where it was heard before the Senate State Affairs Committee. They passed it on, and it has been sent over to the House State Affairs Committee, where it has not yet been scheduled for hearing. Senate Bill 28, modify tax refunds for elderly persons and persons with a disability to make an appropriation therefor and to declare an emergency. In this bill, the sum of $425,000 to the Department of Revenue for providing refunds for real property tax and sales tax to elderly and disabled persons. A portion of the appropriated sum, not to exceed $20,000, may be used for the administration cost of this act. Refund percentages are dependent on household, whether it be single or multiple members of the household. So basically tax relief for elderly persons and people with disability. Senate Bill 46 authorized the disclosure of referral status by the Department of Human Services personnel. The Department of Human Services may disclose information to referring individuals and entities for the purposes of relaying the status of the referral. Basically make the process of referring individuals for services a little more transparent and streamlined, and to help those processes go a little bit quicker. So in this case, we have a process where this made it through the Senate and has now been referred to the House and Human Services Committee. Senate Bill 51, revise property tax levies for school districts and to revise the state aid to general and special education formulas. This modifies tax levy formulas of taxable property valuation, in which is used to fund general and special education. So changing a little bit how counties can calculate their property tax equations so that they can modify how their schools are funded. Senate Bill 74, establish reentry initiatives and programs in the Department of Corrections. This bill is intended to provide appropriate evidence-based health, educational, behavioral, and career readiness programs to an inmate as soon as practicable after the inmate's initial parole date and release plan has been established. This seemed like a good idea. However, it was deferred to the 41st day by the Senate Judiciary Committee. So, in effect, this bill is no longer being heard and will not move forward in the legislative process this year. Senate Bill 99, modify provisions pertaining to applying for an absentee ballot application. This bill allows for the application for absentee ballot up to the time of voting office closure or by 5 p.m. on the day prior to election day, whichever is later. Basically, voting offices were staying open a little bit later to accommodate people's work schedules, and they just wanted to make sure that absentee ballots could come in during a work day of those offices. This made it through the Senate, is on its way over to the House to be assigned to a committee. It has not yet been assigned, but will soon make it over that way. Senate Bill 101 prohibited the conduct of certain physical examinations or screenings on students in a school district without parental consent. For this bill, basically certain non-emergency invasive physical examinations or screenings may not be conducted on a student in a school without prior written consent of the student's parent or guardian. So this doesn't apply to emergency situations or when there's been an accident, something like that. It's just for medical examinations that involves the exposure of private bodily parts, and examination that includes incision, insertion, or injection into the body. So, Senate Bill 119, permit the use of tribal identification cards when registering to vote. It's pretty self-explanatory. The sponsor of this bill hopes to add tribal identification card as a valid form of identification to vote in South Dakota elections, and then also defines what a tribal identification card is. It has been sent to Senate State Affairs Committee and has been there scheduled for hearing. It'll be heard today on January 29th at 10 a.m. in room 414 before the Senate State Affairs Committee, if you're interested in listening in or attending that hearing. Senate Bill 125, require the Department of Social Services to conduct a statewide study on child care and provide an appropriation therefor and declare an emergency. The Department of Social Services shall conduct a study on the provision and cost of child care in this state. It has been referred to the Senate State Affairs Committee. No work or discussion has been had on that bill as of yet. So keep an eye on that one. Senate Bill 147, provide for the distribution of information materials regarding palliative care. It adds the list of items defined in relation to regulation of hospitals and related institutions. Also, it requires the Department of Health make available on its website informational material governing the provision of palliative care. This has been scheduled for hearing before the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. Senate Bill 170, repeal and replace an appropriation regarding the South Dakota Women's Prison and declare an emergency. The legislature in this case is discussing an appropriation of $5,750,000 from the general fund to the Department of Corrections for the purpose of designing, renovating, constructing, furnishing, and equipping the expansion of the healthcare services areas in the South Dakota Women's Prison, including heating, air conditioning, plumbing, water, sewer, electrical facilities, architectural and engineering services, and other services and improvements as may be required. Senate Bill 186, modify provisions pertaining to the voting rights of members of an Indian tribe. This is a house or vehicle bill like we talked about before. Basically, there's no language in this bill. It's just a placeholder to add language to this but you can see what the goal of this type of activity may be. It is first read in the Senate and has been referred to the Senate States Affairs Committee, but no substantive work has been completed in that committee as of today. So Senate Joint Resolution 501, remember, resolutions are not binding legislation. It's basically a statement made by this South Dakota legislature or a request or an intention, but it does not result in a statute which has the binding or force of law. Senate Joint Resolution 501, proposing and submitting to the voters at the next general election an amendment to the Constitution of the state of South Dakota authorizing the state to impose work requirements on certain individuals who are eligible for expanded Medicaid. The reason why I bring this up is because the legislature in this case is stating that they'd like a constitutional amendment saying that there needs to be work requirements if somebody's going to receive or be on Medicaid. They need to work. However, those work requirements wouldn't necessarily apply to individuals who have a disability or would otherwise not have that applied. So this recommendation to propose and submit to the voters in a springing South Dakota constitutional amendment to create a work requirement for Medicaid beneficiaries who have not been diagnosed with being physically or mentally disabled. It states in the statute. This has made it through the Senate State Affairs Committee and is currently awaiting being sent over to the House. So that's the list. That's the list of bills that we'll be covering here today. As I stated, in future videos, we will be slimming this list down a bit. Some of the bills that we talked about today may be defeated or sent to the 41st day. So we will no longer be talking about that. Or they'll just be bills that I just wanted you all to be aware of. Not that we'll necessarily be covering throughout the duration, the entire legislative cycle, but I just wanted to touch on them a little bit so that you guys can be made aware of what's out there, and contact Disability Rights South Dakota or your legislator, or listen in on the committee hearings in case you're interested in these topics. Now again, Disability Rights South Dakota does not bring these bills to your attention with the effort or the intention to imply that we're either supporting these bills or opposed to these bills. This video that we present today is merely an effort to let you all know about what's out there and what's being discussed. If you have any questions over anything that I've talked about today, about the legislative process, how you can become involved, or your rights as a person with disabilities in South Dakota, give us a call at Disability Rights South Dakota. Our number is 605-224-8294, or we'll see you around the Capitol. Thank you very much.